Hey everybody, welcome back to the Film School Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by a special guest. Her name is Berkley Brady, and she is the director behind the incredible new horror film, Dark Nature. We talk about everything from working her way up into her first feature film. We talk about shooting in the incredible yet challenging Canadian Rockies, and we talk about working with practical makeup effects while also trying to avoid doing damage to the natural beauty in some of these incredible parks. You're going to love every second of this interview. I know I did, and I hope you'll tune in to the entire thing. But first, be sure to go check out Dark Nature wherever it's streaming. We're going to get into spoilers here, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Berkley, thanks so much for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on and excited to talk about your movie, Dark Nature, which I had the privilege of watching yesterday before this interview. So we'll dive deep into that. But first, I want to know a little bit about you because behind every movie is someone that made it. So tell me a little bit about kind of your formative years, like what created the person sitting in front of me today?
That's a good question. What I'm aware of that, I'm sure there's a million things that shape all of us that we have no even awareness of. But I grew up on an acreage outside of Edmonton, Alberta for the first 5 years of my life. And my mom was in med school and in her residency. So I really was just going around with my dad, who was a rock and roll drummer, and he had a landscape company. So he planted trees and made gardens and stuff. But we just kind of roamed around. And in my free time, they just sort of opened the door and sent me outside. So I had a very protective German Shepherd, Nika. That's the name of my production company now. And I would literally just take off my boots in the middle of winter. I had no feeling for the cold because I was just on the go. And I really think for artists looking back, that's important. I think that time where I was just by myself, creating little worlds and completely content, I think that must develop your brain in some ways. Like if you have screens telling you, it's different if you're watching something versus inventing it.
Yeah.
I really do think that. And so I always loved stories and writing and drawing. And then I ended up going to get a creative writing degree at the University of Victoria, which I really did not like and actually totally killed my love for writing. And I went into sort of writer's block.
Just because of the amount of it, or?
I just think it's kind of a young age. I think it was 19. I think that's not for everybody.
Sure.
Especially when you come from the structure of high school where you're like, this is the subject, this is what you do. To all of a sudden be like, what's your voice? What's your voice? Do you have a voice?
No, I'm a teenager.
Yeah. And also I think it was, you're also being told you won't ever be able to make a living from this. Being an artist is so hard. And so at that age where it's like, well, my family is sacrificing and spending money to send me here and help me get through this program. You're telling me I'm never going to have financial independence, or I can't even have a job where I'll get to do this thing I'm devoted to. It's so scary.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious about that. And I'm glad you brought it up because I think so many times the word artist is preceded by the word starving. We've gotten used to that in our vocabulary. And just anytime someone talks about pursuing filmmaking, music, whatever it is, it's like, okay, well, what are you going to actually do? Did you have a kind of limiting belief around being able to do that stuck with you after going to school and being told that? Or did you kind of shake that off and go, I know that's not true. I know there's a path for me here. Like, which way did your brain kind of go? Because we absorbed that kind of information very early.
Yeah, I think it was, it definitely stuck with me. And I think it was, I got out of university and started working for a documentary company. And so I thought, okay, well, film is maybe this, it has an industry. I could actually make a living here. And so that was nice to just have that sort of bridge into some career. But then those jobs were contract jobs. And then I went into sort of the freelance and starting to pick up little jobs here and there. And then it was just very, very hard. I just remember feeling like, yeah, I've ruined my life. What have I done? I could have been a doctor. What have I done?
Sure.
But at the same time, I had some really good friends, like my friend Erin Robinsong, the poet, and she's a dancer, and she really grew up with artist parents. So she really kind of understood, she was just an artist. It didn't seem like, she's like, yeah, that's just what you are. You can't really choose.
Yeah.
And that's what you are, Berkley. Sorry to tell you. So we were roommates a long time. And so we were always just, I was very inspired by her to just keep doing things. We would do some projects together. And I thought, okay, it's a way of living in the world. And yeah, I think I almost like hit rock bottom. I was like, I'm going to be a failure completely. And then from there, it's a bit freeing because you're like, well, if you can accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What about your parents? Was your dad was obviously pursuing music, while you were growing up? Like, did he encourage you to follow the artistic path, or were your parents like, you should have been a doctor?
Well, my parents got divorced when I was just about to turn 6. And then I lived away from my dad. And he kind of went on a downward spiral. He is an alcoholic. So we really lost him for a lot of years. So he would kind of come in and out of my life, which was really hard because I'd say he was my best friend. And then my mom actually is a doctor. So she was very much like, don't do it. It's so hard.
Really? Okay.
And I think it is a really hard job being a doctor. And I think, but especially in Canada, and she's a general practitioner, a family doctor, you're not like wealthy, like you're very like middle class, and but she has to pay her staff. She has, and it's like you're at the whim of the government for what your wages are going to be.
Sure.
It's just a full on job. When you look at like the amount of training they have to get, the hours they work, they make very little.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
she was like, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned working in documentary and like kind of cutting your teeth there, which I could tell through watching Dark Nature. Like it feels very documentary in a lot of the way that you spend time on the landscape, you spend time on the environment and things like that. I am curious to know, being outside, running around, writing, like you got to explore your creative side that way. Were there things on screen and movies or television shows that really inspired you as a creative early on that you started bringing into that work?
Early on, I think I always really loved photography, and that's how I got into, when I had writer's block, I started doing photography and illustration. And that really got me really looking at a lot of illustrators and obviously photographers. So I think when I started, I would focus a lot on like breaking down an image I like how did they get that? Oh, look, that one character's in the foreground, one's in the background, like depth of field. Oh, it's nice when things are kind of blurry in the back, or it's not, So I think I really love the photographer Helen Levette. I think she's incredible. I love the humanity and the colors in her photographs. And then looking at just for film, I think I was less specific as to who I was looking at and just finding little pieces here and there that I like, oh, that was neat. They went from a close up and moved around, and now we're on the other character's shoulder. Like, how did they do that? Oh, okay. Just like always breaking things down.
I think it's interesting, that photography influence, because one of the things watching any project, and I want to talk about Dark Nature in a second. Like, one of the things that I always look at in debut films is like how much the camera just moves around and how much people cut away from things, or it feels very uncontrolled in the sense of like, okay, let's try to shoot everything. You can feel that through the screen. And that's what I noticed in your work, is that you're okay lingering on something for a second, or taking the time to not just do, how do I make it look cinematic and blur out my background? Like, how do I show this scene? And so I'm always interested to hear like that photography background or things like that. Tell me a little bit about stepping into the feature world, because you've worked in television, worked in documentary. What made you decide like it's time to jump, let's do this and take on, a large project like this?
Well, I got out of film school, my master's program, I believe in 2014 or 2015. And from that moment, I was trying to get a feature made. So it took, 6 years? We shot in 2021, got funding in 2020. So yeah, just like 5 to 6 years to finally get it off the ground. So I felt sort of past due. I was like, I am very ready to do this. And I think I'd worked on my friend. She made a movie called Electric Children. She was in my cohort at Columbia, and I'd worked on that as the assistant art director. I'd lingered on sets of other friends' films. My friend Christina Cho, she made the movie Nancy. I felt like a doula on that movie because it took her so long to get it off the ground as well. And just sort of being that emotional support for somebody, because she was my roommate at the time too. So
Yeah.
we just lived and breathed that film and getting it off the ground. So when it did really well and went to Sundance, it was like, we're going. Like there was kind of a little crew of us who felt like that. So yeah, I think for the feature aspect, I think if you've done a few shorts, you really are ready, because it's just then a question more of the stamina.
Right.
And the crew, like working with crew and working with producer and all those type of things that I think you just have to keep doing. Like it really is just something you learn through experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just feels like multiples of what you're already doing, basically.
Exactly. Like I think once you've taken a few projects through an edit, you're ready, because I think going through your edit is so important, because you come to that moment where you're like, oh, if only I had that shot. Oh, I remember when I wanted it. Oh, I remember how I let it slip through my fingers. Like you're not going to keep letting that happen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting funding for it. So you said it was funded in 2020. Like, was COVID like a difficult factor in that? Or with the type of movie it was it like perfect because, it's going to be a small group of people in a remote location. This is going to be very feasible.
Yeah, I think the fact it was outdoors helped, because at the time there was still a lot of obviously concern around COVID, and the fact that it was outside was a good thing. And there was a big question of insurance, like how are insurers dealing with it? But it was just enough into COVID that there was sort of an understanding. People were in the industry were starting to wrap their heads around how we could still do this.
Right.
But then, and during the shoot, we had COVID officer, COVID protocols, and actually one person, not on our set, but a crew member, while outside, got COVID.
Wow.
But he was really, really responsible about it. So he was like, the second he started not feeling well at all, he didn't come to work. He was someone who always had his mask on, even when he was away from people. So he was, I really appreciated that about him. And so no one else got it.
Yeah.
Like we caught it. Protocols went in. It was like everyone get tested. Everyone who'd been in his proximity. So there was a lot, and it is expensive. Like all those things cost.
Well, yeah, and when it's a 3-week thing, I mean, it could kill your shoot. Like if you had caught it, or if your lead catches it, I mean, you can't just wait with everybody. So, I was curious about that. So diving into the project, and I mean, you bit off a lot for this. So you're shooting outdoors. I was listening to another podcast talking about, having 40-minute hikes to certain locations and shooting with water. And from what I understand, you shot it in the same location as Prey. So you've got, and I'm assuming not with the same budget as Prey, presumably. So
what gave you that idea?
Yeah. Where do you even start? Like, where do you start going, hey, we're going to go hike into the wilderness and shoot a movie? Like, how do you even approach that? Like, what's step one going to a project like that?
I think the inspiration and the desire, and where we live, that is, Calgary in the area is used as a location on so many projects. Like we're booming here. There are cruise shortages. Like if like Fargo was just wrapped, we did Wind River just wrapped, Joe Pickett, Billy the Kid. There's so much that films here because of the landscape, because it's so beautiful. And so being from here and being really familiar with it, I think that gave me a confidence that, I know how to get there, and I know how to get in and out. The crews are really tough. They know how to work in these conditions. Why not use this knowledge to amp the look of the film?
Right.
Oh, it can look like something special.
Yeah. Was it tough getting cast on board for it? Like in conversations through casting, going like, this could be a little bit tougher than, if we're shooting in a studio somewhere or shooting, more in the city.
The two leads, Madison and Hannah, when I was talking to them before they were cast, were both really into it. They were like, oh, I like the outdoors. I like adventure. Both of them and all the actors who were in the water were definitely like, wait, so how are we going to where's this water scene? That's the thing that kind of scared them.
Yeah.
But we did have a lot of our costume budget. I'd say the majority of it seriously did go to these custom made wetsuits. That were made for them, in their skin color. So that was under their clothes, custom fit to their bodies. And that really helped, but it's still cold and it doesn't cover your head. So when they have to dunk down, they would be like, wow, like, okay, I have 3 dunks in me, like no more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that got tough when takes wouldn't work because of technical issues.
Yeah.
Including one when they're in the water scene, there's a big rock that they're kind of pressed up against, and there's so much iron in that rock, it would cut out the signal to the camera.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah, so we did one take that was just a really big take where like the character Tara like puts her hood up, which means we understand that like she doesn't want to talk.
Yeah.
She made her decision, and she had this epic like she gets the hood up so badass and she ducks, and we're like, we did it, and she's like, oh my god, it was so cool, but I did it, and everyone's celebrating. And then the first AC was like, oh, we lost signal on that, we didn't get it.
Don't shoot the messenger kind of moment.
Yeah. And so I went over to her, I was like, you did amazing. And she comes from theater, and so it's like, okay, so now this is your real like film acting moment where I need to tell you it was not caught. It was not recorded.
Yeah.
And we just, because then she had done it, her hood, everything was just so wet and she was so cold, and it just, we never got it again. Like what we have now, I'm just like, oh God, it kills me. Like we had the best take. Right. But that sort of stuff really gets you in the mountains.
Sure. Yeah. And then I definitely want to dive into the cast, but I think I keep talking about the landscapes and the land because I feel like that's the character. Like there's like
it's a big character.
It's could be one of the leads if you wanted to say that. Like it's interesting because the way it's shot and knowing it was shot, because when I watched it and it got to the water scenes, I was like, I feel like this looks like Prey a little bit, like the same landscape. But what was interesting is the landscape is still shot so differently than that movie. And so you don't feel like you're just in the same place. And I know lots of movies are shot there, but it doesn't feel familiar. It feels like its own thing. And what was unique to me and stood out in the movie is that the movie feels very claustrophobic, even in its wide shots. So like, what was kind of your conversation with the cinematographer going like, here's how we capture this? Because like, you could throw up a drone and here's some trees and then we'll cut to close-ups of our actors. But it was a lot more, I feel like a lot more thought out than that. A lot more strategic in the way it was captured.
Yeah. So my cinematographer is Gerald Lim. He's based out of Vancouver, and the reason I chose him was I loved his photography. Like it was really like going to his website. And that's why I say for any cinematographers, like your website matters so much. Your reel matters a lot too. But your website, I had, my top selects and people who had been recommended to me. And I went to his, I was like, his is just different. It's popping, like the colors, the composition. I can tell this is someone who loves the image, like as much as I do. And so he was really inspired when he came here, and we were I'd already selected the locations, and so then it was a lot about like, when can we be in this location, what time of day, let's bring in the AD to start scheduling around that. Also there's a big discussion, do we do anamorphic or not? We decided not to, and we also decided not to use drones, so there's no drones in the movie, even though I love drones. And I think the really fancy drones that come with like a company who comes and operates for you are in filmmaking a new world. They're almost like jibs, like giant jibs, the way they can really move with the character. And I really saw that on Wind River. So I'm excited to use them in the future, but I really wanted to avoid like, it's a horror movie in the outdoors, drone. So it's like no drones. And then I think because we were just really on the ground, we weren't, oh, we have a beautiful trailer, we'll come out, grab these shots, then we'll go here, and there's a tent village for the video. It's like, no, it's us with a monitor, with the actors on that ground. And I think that feeling also just isn't something you can, it comes with the image. So I think we're in it as opposed to like looking at it.
No, I noticed that early on, like there wasn't a lot of those kind of establishing shots that you would normally see. And I loved all the shots of the cars driving like into the location, especially, and I'll just go ahead and throw out spoiler warning because I want to just talk about the movie. So I'm not going to do the dance around everything, but the end scenes when they're leaving and the car kind of comes out into that crossroads and the camera's obviously mounted on car behind going around. Like it's really beautiful shots that just look like those look expensive. Like it makes the movie look really big and really cool. And so I love the look of it, and just the approach. And then on top of that, you've got the cast, which like, I mean, Hannah Anderson is amazing in this movie. She's a great lead. They have a lot to chew on too throughout this project because you're dealing with a lot of heavy themes. The movie really could fall apart if you don't have good chemistry with the cast. So like finding them is a big piece. Talk to me a little bit about the story and the themes that they're dealing with, the trauma that's weaved throughout the movie. Like, what was the kind of direction there, and what were the conversations you had kind of going into the movie?
Well, I really wanted to talk to them about friendship, and they each really connected in their own lives with having really close friends.
Yeah.
So that was something that we could really understand, and sort of a commonality that we just was like a baseline understanding. And then with each of them, I would talk to them about different aspects. So with Madison's character, Carmen, her character is she's just that kind of person who can do anything, get things done, and who really loves her friend, but who's also come to a point where she's kind of realizing their friendship is taking a toll on her that may be too much. So that's what she's dealing with. And then with Hannah's character, we talked a lot about the ways we can love things, minimizing things. So she's minimizing. I think she's someone who's not really being honest with herself. And that means she's also not being honest with her friend. But but for that character, we have to believe she believes what she believes.
Yeah.
And so for Hannah, she kind of they're both just so talented, and so they're quite experienced as well. They're in their 30s now, so they have a lot under their belt, and that makes a big difference. Did they
know each other at all before this?
Hannah knew of Madison because they both live in Toronto or just outside, and so they're living that very similar actor's life in Toronto.
Sure.
And then Hannah had seen Madison in a theatrical production of Killer Joe, where Madison famously did not wear pants. I guess there's a scene where she's like pantless. And so they have like a merkin, I think it's called, or something. Yeah. It's like your fake, like little like pubes. It's like a goatee that you put on. So she was sort of talking about that. But Hannah said that seeing Madison in that role had really inspired her. So she came in with a great admiration for Madison.
Yeah, you don't want to mix those up with the fake goatees. That would be a bad mishap.
Bad look.
No,
it'd be funny. Maybe someone should make like a hair bikini, so it's like two goatees on the top, one at the bottom. That would be really. Would be
really gross. Maybe your next movie. No, I asked that because they have such a good chemistry together, and I think one of the standout scenes, and it sounds funny if someone hasn't seen the movie, but the scene for me that really. I was like, oh, I buy into this 100%, was the scene where they're peeing in the mountains, and that back and forth where they're kind of being playful, and like, it's one of the few moments in the movie where like there's no tension at all. Like it's 100% break in the middle of the movie. And, I love the moments where Madison's kind of looking over her shoulder, and there's like this, it feels like a friendship that's been there for 30 plus years. Like they've known each other a really long time. And I was surprised at how much chemistry was able to be felt just in that, like, you feel it throughout the movie, but like in that one moment in such a tense movie for the full runtime, that moment of pause where you're like, I feel like these are best friends. These are 100% real friends.
Yeah. So. I love that moment too. And there was so much good ad-libbing in that we cut out, because we shot, so many takes. And I think Madison especially is just so funny. She had me cracking up. And the two of them, I know it was a really hard shoot for both of them, but I have so many memories of them just laughing their heads off and like waiting for them to stop laughing. Like, okay, we got to go, ladies. Like
we're also shooting.
Yeah. But they're like consummate professionals, but also like they really did have a great chemistry. So they, and I think that's part of their training is how to work with other actors. I feel like they both kind of came in and like got the assignment. They're like, all right. And it was there. So they still are friends today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm wondering with the more heavy scenes, especially because this movie opens with a pretty brutal moment, with this scene of assault. And then I was like, okay, this is intense. And then she opens the door and then you see her pet is like murdered. And I was like, oh, they're going for it in this movie. tell me a little bit about like the approach to shooting those moments. Because a lot of times historically in horror, you do get the male gaze of assault sequences, and that's why generally there's a lot of movies where it's 70 minutes of just brutality and then 10 minutes of empowerment. Approaching this movie, did you have lines you didn't want to cross? Did you have a specific way you wanted to approach the way that trauma and assault was handled responsibly and dealt with in a mature way throughout the filmmaking process?
Yeah, definitely. I really didn't want it to be trauma porn. And we actually have a lot about Tara's character that we cut, partly because it was sound, but we could have ADR'd it. But as we cut, I'm like, I just don't want to do this trauma porn of like, what happened to her? Like, it's almost like we all know the stories. Like, you could go on YouTube and watch like Soft White Underbelly, or, there's so many things that are just like, you could fill it in. And I think that's almost more interesting. And with the assault scene in the beginning, I really did want to take that just from the perspective of Joy's character. So it's like, and there's actually a shot that we didn't get that does kill me, as any filmmaker will know. But there is like when the spoiler alert, but he is choking her. She is faking when she like kind of passes out so that he'll let go. And I feel like what I wanted was like a close up of her eye, like closed and then like open, and she looks like, so you're like, oh, you understand she was kind of faking it. Because I think as a woman or a weaker person physically weaker, that's the way you're going to get out of an attack, is outsmarting somebody. Like, you're not going to win the battle physically. So in my mind, her character like pretends she's kind of like passing out. He's stunned. Oh no, what have I done? Then she punches him and gets out.
Yeah.
So I feel like, but it was really interesting editing that with my editor, because he just didn't have a sense of like this scene at all, because I think he's definitely not an abuser and he's also a man. So it was just really interesting. I was like, no, like, let this happen. Like, it was just really, I think, harder for him. Whereas for me, it's just part of reality of being a woman, is like myself, my friends, most people I know, they've dealt with something like this.
Right.
So I'm like, let's look at it from what this feels like to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I just am always fascinated by the choice of what to show, what not to. And it does, like you said, I think at this point we have enough intuition to know we can read between the lines. And did you see Jethica by any chance? That came out last year. It was an indie film. I think he made it, I want to say it was like $3,000 or $5,000 or so. And they rented an Airbnb with a couple actor friends and shot this very just cool ghost story. But essentially this woman's stalker dies and starts coming back as a ghost. And so he can't harm her. He's just there. And so it's like these moments where she sees him standing there, he's saying something to her and she can't get rid of him. He can't do anything to her. So it dwells on these like kind of moments between them. But I asked the director of that movie, I said, did you choose not to go more horror and more like, oh, the lights are flickering and he's here? And he's like, we all know what stalkers do. Like, I don't need to spend a bunch of cinematic vocabulary explaining it. It's a lot more interesting what we don't usually see. So anyway, I think that is a very similar approach to what you just mentioned. And I think, honestly, you'd probably really like Jethica. It's kind of an underseen movie. It's
like JETHICA.
And I think it's so her stalker has a lisp, so I'm pretty sure that's why it's Jethica. Because he stands outside her house and basically goes, Jethica. So, but
oh my gosh, that's great, because exactly. The thing about having a stalker is the paranoia. It's what they're taking from you in your life. It's not just when they're watching you. It's that everywhere you go, you're wondering if you're being watched.
Exactly.
That's the torture of it. I actually have a friend. I met her through a writing program at the Banff Center here in Canada. Any writers, I really recommend it. Her name is Julie Lalonde, and she was stalked. She wrote a book called The Life and Death of Julie S. Lalonde, Resilience is Futile. And she was stalked for 10 years. And her stalker actually was killed in a car accident, which is just this like strange twist to the story. But it's something she lives with. And a lot of her work is about it. She does a lot of bystander intervention work, sexual assault kind of information. She's just really, really smart person. But she's like, I tell my story all the time. It doesn't mean it's like doesn't still affect her. Like, it totally gave her PTSD. It's something she'll live with forever. Like, awful.
Yeah. Well, that's what is interesting about the movie I just mentioned, your film, is that theme of it not leaving you. And it's something, we could totally go sidetrack on all this stuff, but it is so integral. Like, I work with a lot of people who've been victims of abuse. So I have a whole nother podcast I deal with clergy abuse victims. And so a lot of these movies like really resonate with me, and like that emotion of, oh, they're not leaving. And I think it goes so far beyond, like, I think a lot of movies just go, here's a flashback of the assault, over and over again. And I think there's so much that, like her character, like Hannah's character zoning out, throughout the movie, and kind of even before anything supernatural happens, her kind of disassociating with people in the car. Like, it's a very realistic, I think, approach to it. And it's funny watching the movie because I kind of felt similar to this is going to sound really bizarre at first. I felt very similar to how I feel when I watch From Dusk Till Dawn. And the reason I say that is I love From Dusk Till Dawn because it's From Dusk Till Dawn. But I love the crime story in the beginning so much that I could just have that continue on. And then I love this vampire section, and I could have a whole movie of that. And part of me like gets heartbroken because I'm like, I just want to see more of this. And there's part of me watching this movie where I'm like, I don't even need the monster at the end of the day. Like, I could watch them all on a camping retreat together, working through this together. And then it happens to go into this horror movie, which is really fascinating. But again, I think it speaks to the strength of the characters, where I'm like, okay, I just want more of this, more talking, more communication between them. It's really special that way. But it does deliver the goods with the creature. So talk to me a little bit about the creature design. I know you mentioned, there's some homage to The Descent for sure. But you wanted to stay away from that with the creature design. And I mean, I don't blame you. That's a very distinctive design. What were the influences and kind of references when coming up with this creature?
The references were really predators of the area, and also, tree bark, the natural look of the very specific area we were in. Because in my backstory for the creature, it's like he's this interdimensional being that basically got stuck in this place, and he lives in this cave, and he's lived there for like thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. But like anything that's there for tens and tens of thousands of years, it's evolved to this place.
Yeah.
Because I'm really fascinated and think it's this like massive tragedy that we're all not really paying attention to the biodiversity we're losing at this time of the planet. And when you look at how incredible it is, like that there's birds who have beaks that only fit these certain plants that are only in this place. Like, that's amazing. This is this like quantum computer we're living in, and we're just like, build a suburb. Who cares?
Yeah, right.
It's like, no, it matters. And it's amazing. So with this creature, Kyrie McPherson, she was also the head makeup artist, and the costume designer, Jennifer Crichton, really worked to create that. Like, they would take tree bark and go and finish his suit to match that. So that's why he's actually in shots that you don't see him at all, but he is there watching them. But he's just so camouflaged. Yeah. And so that's kind of fun. And then, I really thought about predators of this area. We have cougars. Bears are not really predators. So I was really thinking about cougars, and I really wanted the actor to move with a lot of stealth. And we actually had an incredible creature costume designed by somebody else that we put so much of our money into. But when the actor got to set, he just couldn't move in that suit. The head was too big. Yeah. So it was like, this is a custom built latex suit to his body. No one else could wear this. He couldn't move. So really, Kyra and Jen saved the day, because we had to, unfortunately, like, we couldn't pay the other person anymore. And like, they just worked on that at night.
Yeah. Wow.
And especially Kyra, like she really talked, like she was in contact. I'd say she was my main point person, and she would just say like, what about this? What about this? And I'd say that's just where you really learn who on your crew you're going to be taking forward. Mm-hmm. So I'd say like she was one of those people, and there were a few of them, but she was one who I'm like, I never want to make a movie without this woman. And if I can help it, I won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like she was emotional support, creative brilliance, great attitude, good at her job. Like I
Yeah.
want to work there all the time.
Yeah. I'm curious, are there a lot of shots where this creature's hidden in the background? Because now I'm curious, like, how many shots did I miss?
There are more than are actually in the final cut, but I'd say there's probably one where you didn't see him. One where he's revealed, two where he is, and then he's revealed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. That's all I'll say on that.
Gotta rewatch and look for it. Yeah, no, the effects are super cool. And I think you mentioned, I was listening to you on an interview and you were talking that your makeup person, her name's Kyra.
Yeah, Kyra McPherson. And then Kyra Harper is.
I was going to say, I was like,
actors.
Am I getting the cast mixed in? No. So she actually works with the military for training. So she's doing like anatomically correct makeups for like their training drills and things like that. Like, which is just super like interesting. It's interesting because like Tom Savini was kind of that background. He's a Vietnam War photographer, brought that into his makeup effects. So I always think that's fascinating. Going in and doing the practical effects, which again is something that's a lot to chew on versus doing, let's throw some digital blood here or do this. Like, do you feel like you got to go as far as you wanted to go with those effects? Did you feel like you were hamstrung at all with budget? Like, or is it kind of exactly like, okay, I want to show this. I have this foot here. I've got this head here. Like I've got exactly what I want in these moments.
I think I love, like you say, she is really trained in anatomy and she trained as a nurse as well. Wow. So she really understands anatomy. So I love the scene where Carmen is stitching or Joy stitching up Carmen's leg, because if you look at that wound, it's like there's like a subcutaneous layer, there's like a little fat layer, like it's so realistic. So and my mom's a doctor, as I said, so I grew up around like pictures of this kind of thing. I've always wanted to do stitches. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but I do want to practice. My mom says you practice on pig's feet, like from the butcher, not alive. That's a different horror.
Don't try that.
To do, because I'd love to just be like, someone needs stitches, I could do it, like, and do it really well, like plastic surgery level. Okay, but there were things like when we were by the water and had a scene with the blood in the water, just like the blood ran out. Somehow the blood ran out and we're like, well, we need more blood, but the blood's up the hill, the clock is ticking, you don't have time. So things like that can kind of get it really, those were the things where I didn't get to go as far as I wanted because we just ran out of time. Same thing with like dressing trees. Everything is done with like a lot of respect for the environment. So if you really bloody up a tree, it's probably like a fake part of the tree that we've put onto the tree. And then you take that with you. Same with the blood going into the cave. When they're going in the exterior cave, going up and you see all that blood, all of that was actually a gel. And then they sort of dress the gel, because then you peel the gel off and you take it with you.
Gotcha.
And there's a mat on the ground too. And then you cover the mat with rock so it looks like the ground. But then you take all that back with you, because that blood has some sugar in it and it would attract animals. And it's just, it would harm the park.
Yeah. Yeah. And you worked with the park services a bit, like building the dam and all that sort of. So like, so working with them and doing all that, like, and blood in the water, was that an issue at all? Or was that like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. It's non-toxic, the blood that we use for that. So it's specifically marked as okay, but it is definitely something I was like, that's a lot to put in this little stream. And the water's so cold. It's not like it just like evaporates or just sort of runs into water. You can kind of see it keep going. I'm like, this can't be good for the environment, but apparently it's all non-toxic. It totally breaks down. So it is environmentally safe.
And was that difficult with reset times for like blood in the water, scenes like that? Did it take a long time to clear before another shot? Like, was that a difficult thing as well?
Yeah, we definitely planned those, like the scene where Tara gets it. we like planned it to be at the end because it does take
Gotcha.
time. But I actually would have wanted more. I think one problem was like the blood, because you're pumping it, right? It's coming out of a
Mhm.
pump, you're pumping it into the water. It was coming with a lot of bubbles. And then
Oh,
there's this debate. No, there is bubbles with real blood. Like, but yeah, it looks too bubbly. And then you're waiting for the bubbles to go down, and
right.
then it's gone, and then you're out of blood.
Th-
Then it's like,
That's interesting
okay,
too. Like, did you ever have any arguments with Kyra as far as like, okay, this is what I want it to look like in the movie, and she's going, this is what it would actually look like, and it's like this. What's it's kind of like gunshots in a movie, like, or punches. We know what they
yeah,
actually sound like, but movie punches sound a lot cooler. Like, were there
yeah.
any conversations like that?
Yo, absolutely. And I would just say, like, she's just such a wonderful person to work with that she'll say, like, okay, all right, my dude, like, this is what I promise you it would be. Like, and I'm like, it is, but it looks like this. She goes, yeah, yeah, I see that. Like, your call, it's your call. Like, she'll just give me the information that she has, and I trust her. And
Yeah,
then I have to ultimately make the call, because I think for all directors out there, it's like you're the one in the edit.
yeah,
And that is, I think, again, an experience thing. Anytime in other projects where I let something go that didn't feel right to me, I'm the one sitting in the edit with that mistake.
yeah.
So it's like you learn how to be like, remember that feeling. I
It's
don't want
like
that
pain
feeling.
now or so much more
Yes,
pain later. Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
that's a hard thing to remember in general, is that none of these people are going to be there with you at the edit. They're not going to
Hmm.
be at the premiere. I mean, hopefully they will be if you're in the town, but everyone leaves and goes on to other projects. Whereas the director is with that project through years more.
Yeah, it doesn't wash off so easy. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm happy to say it's a really great film,
Yeah.
and I'm always nervous, like when I book the interview and then they send the screener, and then I'm like, this is gonna be a really awkward conversation if I don't like this movie. And so, I got like halfway through and I was like, okay, good. There's plenty to talk about. It's really great. I'm excited to see what you work on next. I know you have a project. I don't have to wait too long. In like 10 days as of this recording, you have a anthology short that is coming out to Screambox. Tell me just a little tease of what that's about. Please, no spoilers, 'cause I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But what can we expect from this anthology?
So it's the creepypasta anthology, and I have a short in it called The Gray Man, which is about an author who, looking at it now, it's very thematically similar, but I actually didn't write the script to The Gray Man. So it's just a coincidence, I guess,
Yeah.
if there are such things. But it's about a writer who has a very sort of dark past with something called the Gray Man. So it starts with her writing about this experience one night alone in her house. And maybe through writing it, she evokes it. That's all I'll say.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I can't wait to check it out. And again, really excited to see what you work on next. I've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask
Okay.
you some questions I ask everybody that comes on the show.
Awesome.
I call it a rapid round, but it always ends up there's some stumpers in here that take a minute. So
Okay.
I'm curious to hear your answers. First question: who do you think is the most underrated artist working right now?
My uncle Bradley
Hmm.
Meyer.
What does he do? What kind of art?
He's a painter and he does a lot of digital art right now. But when I go to his house, it's full of his paintings, and they could be in museums. Like
Hmm.
his oil paintings are so incredible. And I think he's just inherently not a promoter, and I kind of love that about his generation, that I think they were still like wary of certain elements of capitalism, and he just sort of did his thing, and now he just does a lot of digital art on his iPad,
Yeah.
but it's always brilliant.
Yeah.
He's
That's so cool.
brilliant.
Yeah. Um, what do you think is the best decade of film history?
Mm. I think the best decade of film history, it's so hard not to say 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. You're hard pressed to pick one that's
I
better,
know.
but
I mean, that there's so many movies from the 50s and the
mhm.
40s as well. I mean, it's been film fire for a good 80 years at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I always now, so when I, even like a year ago, like I was always like, what's the best decade? And now I think there's kind of like the best half decades, because when you start really
Mm-hmm.
diving in the conversation, like, because people will go, like Tarantino famously is always like, the 80s was the worst year of movie, which is like ridiculous, like, because
Yeah.
so many great movies came out in that time. But then you like start thinking like, well, 86 onward, maybe, like, but 80 to 84, 85, really solid stretch of movies. Or you go to the 70s, you're like, man, the early 70s when they're really going crazy, like, I mean, I would say 71 to 77 is like this golden era. And the
Yeah.
50s is a very homogenized, kind of bland group of movies. And then you've got snuck in throughout that, like all these beautiful Technicolor musicals and these
Yeah.
great, like, kind of movies that press the boundaries for the time. So I
Yeah.
always think like half decades now, it's hard for me to go, and I think we're in one right now, honestly. Like I look at especially the horror output of Barbarian and like these
Yeah.
different films that are coming out. It's really interesting what everything's shaped up to be in this decade so far.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I love Barbarian.
yeah, it was great. And well, even I mean, it's the reactionary stuff. Like we've had all these superhero movies for so long, and now we're getting like Babylon and Barbarian and like these very crazy, bizarre, far heavy swings this other direction. I'm excited to
Yeah.
see that keep going. Um, if you were given the green light to remake any film, what would you choose and why?
Hmm. I almost want to say beaches because I love beaches so much. And I really see how like it's so influenced by Douglas Sirk. So
Hmm.
I think, and he's a filmmaker that I really love. So to try to emulate what he did with the story of friendship, but in our time could be really cool. And also Blue Crush, I think, but I would do it on snowboards.
Okay, yeah, because you have a big snowboarding background, right? That's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, growing up by the mountains, kind of have to, like, that's got
What
to
else are you gonna
happen.
do?
So
Yeah, we were just
awesome.
like my friend and I, just like super, just like horny teenagers. So I'm like, just like any teenager, but it's like if you're a girl in the 90s, you'd
Yeah,
go to the hill and be like the only girl snowboarding. It was very motivating.
that's your in for sure.
That was our, and we're like, yes, no competition here.
That's funny. I added beaches to my list. I'll have to check it out. Um,
Good.
what of your projects do you think is the best representation of you as a creator?
Hmm. I think Dark Nature, because of its emphasis on photography and hopefully some big emotions. I really want to make people feel. I want to kind of, I want you to be able to sit in a theater and cry, laugh, scream. If I can get you to do all three things in a movie, I've succeeded.
Awesome. What is a film that people would be surprised to know that you enjoy? So this can be a guilty pleasure. It could be something that's so out of left
Mm.
field that it would shock people. What's a movie that you just absolutely love? People would be shocked by.
Shocked by is hard because I would say I love Silence of the Lambs, but who doesn't?
Yeah,
That's not
right.
shocking.
Right.
Uh, I mean, I always talk about beaches because I think because it is a melodrama, people are like, "What?" And they'll sort of laugh at it. But I'm sorry, it's been making me cry since like '86, so there's something in there. Shocked, shocked, shocked. I'm going through my Rolodex here. I think I'm just like a basic. All my movies are like just like beloved. I'll
Yeah, that's funny.
have to pass that one. Shocked. I'm gonna think about it.
I just thought of this question, but I'm curious to know your answer. If you had to program a double bill of Dark
Mm.
Nature and another movie, what would you choose?
Hmm. I would say beaches, but I've said beaches so much. It's like, get over beaches, lady. I can't get over it. Yeah, beaches.
That's an interesting double
Because
feature.
it's about friendship. And I think what I love about beaches, and I think they got so right, was the flux in a friendship
Hmm.
that like you can have the biggest fight with your best friend and both be bawling and like, but like your true best friend, there are lines you're just not going to cross. And then you come back together and you're there for each other.
Yeah.
until one of you dies. So it's like very
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. I guess it does make sense. No, I laughed when I heard you describe Dark Nature. You're like, it's a movie about friendship. I was like, that sounds so beautiful.
Right.
And then you could cut like a trailer that's very cheery and happy about that idea. But
Right.
yeah, that's funny.
I
Um,
challenge someone to cut that trailer. I will get you an incredible prize. If someone out there does that, I'm gonna
Interesting.
find an incredible prize and I will send it to you.
That'd be super funny. Did you see not to circle back to Barbarian too much, but did you see when they cut the Justin Long trailer where it's like they cut it like a family movie with
I
him?
heard about this, but I didn't see it.
You got to check that out. It's super funny. They did exactly
Awesome.
that. They're like from the I forget how they did. I think it was like from the studio that brought you Alvin and the Chipmunks, and like it was just so bizarre. But yeah,
I
definitely worth watching.
love that.
I'll have to give that treatment to Dark Nature. Maybe we'll have to figure that out.
Right.
And last question I ask everybody: what is the best piece of advice you would give to an aspiring filmmaker who's listening to this? And I always say, no pressure. It could change someone's life. So, but just a simple question to end on.
I think to really trust your instincts and your gut, and that it's okay that takes time to know how to do that. So I think that really embracing failure and embarrassment as the key marker that you're improving.
Hmm.
So each time you fail, it's not, I suck. Why aren't I good? I'll never do it. Yes, you're going to have those thoughts. Just recognize them and think like, what did I learn? How could I do it differently? If it's sort of embarrassing you or it's hard to accept, that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Because each of those things are really the only way that we can learn. And same with showing your films. When you show it and you can feel in the room, it's not working. They don't like it.
Yeah.
That's really good. Get used to that feeling because you don't want it to happen again. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're not afraid of it, you'll be making your next thing faster.
Yeah, I love. There's a clip of Spielberg on set of, or I think he was being interviewed while he was making Bridge of Spies in like 2015. So he's like, already, he's Spielberg. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
Spielberg. And he said, every time I go on set, I want to throw up. Like, I feel like I'm taking a test. And I was like, if he feels like that, like anything I'm doing today, I can feel pretty good about.
Yes.
I want to just go like a few feet deeper on what you just said about, feeling comfortable, like making your decision and not being embarrassed, not being afraid to make your own decision, essentially.
Yeah.
And I want to know, like, what's the balance between listening to people who've been doing it longer than you, or maybe are experts who are on your crew? Because it's going to happen, especially early on. Most of the crews probably worked on more things than you, or they've got insights that you might not have. How do you determine when you're going, okay, I'm being smart and trusting my gut and doing what I know is right for the project versus, okay, I should not do that because everyone's telling me no? Like, where do you find that balance and know I'm ready to just draw the line versus listen to the input of everybody and follow their kind of guidance there?
I think that's a really important question. And I don't think there's any answer that I can give aside from just get more experience doing it. And I think the more you build your team and know that there are those people that that you can trust, then you're weighing it through, because we're human beings. We all have ego, and there's especially a lot of ego on film sets because
What?
people get insecure. Yeah. What?
That's,
It's sort
I've
of,
never heard that.
it's very, very hard. People get tired too. So it's
Yeah.
harder to be the person we always want to be when you're exhausted and under a really high stress situation. But I think that when something trips you up, and like for myself, I know it's like, something feels like wrong in my gut. Oh, I didn't like that. Like, I think I need that. Then I think with experience, you do get better at thinking, yeah, this is worth taking the time to go back and redo or changing. And then knowing, well, actually in the edit at the end of the day, do I really need this? And you need to be able to make that decision quickly. You can't until you've get more experience. So even myself, I'm going to be so much better on my next feature.
Yeah.
And hopefully then on the next one. But for those who are building up to a feature or doing their shorts, it's just check your gut. And I think too, thing that there's going to be people on your set who are maybe trying to undermine you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not maybe you, like it might be them. And I think as a director, there's a lot of people on set who want to be a director,
Mm-hmm.
who also want to show, and it's usually people who are like less likely to go further because they feel like, so they have something to prove. So it's almost like with actors, they say like the biggest actors are actually like the most generous, nice people. It's more like the
No.
middle people who are just very demanding, can often be,
Sure.
they want to feel important because they know that they're not as important as they want to be yet.
No.
So I think recognizing that there are those people who are going to be projecting their own BS onto you, also trying to undermine you, or just bringing their own ego. And all you can really do is have boundaries and just try to get some distance from it. Like you
No.
can't change them.
Right. Yeah.
So,
That crew around you is so important.
yeah.
I'm excited to see what you do next and
Awesome.
the next film and the next film, and continue to see you grow and develop your work. And again, the fact this debut feature is shocking because it's really, really great. It's a great film, and again, I'm glad glad it is. But it's amazing. I'm excited to see what you do next, and thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll chat again soon for the next one.
Well, thank you so much for having me and watching the film and preparing such great questions. That was really a great conversation. Thank you.